Just last month that he's against the deal. Still, McDaniel says there might be a little wiggle room. A committee of cabinet members that evaluates foreign deals, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, or CFIUS, could decide to take a second look at it.
Let's say Trump comes in and he's neutral. The new people on CFIUS decide that it's worth taking a second look at. They could continue the investigation, keep it open.
There's a lot at stake here, of course, for Nippon and U.S. Steel, but also for some powerful interests arrayed against them. Henrietta Treyes, co-founder of Veda Partners Investment Advisors, says there are real national security concerns.
Concern about having a foreign ally, in this case Japan, own, nonetheless, a very critical part of U.S. infrastructure.
There's another powerful voice against the deal, the United Steelworkers International Union. Nippon and U.S. Steel have promised to honor existing union contracts, but Sean Higgins of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, free market think tank, says he understands why the union is wary.
It would be difficult for them to negotiate with a foreign owner. It always is if you're a U.S. union.
But Higgins adds the deal with Nippon could give U.S. Steel employees some job security by helping the company they work for grow and compete with China. I'm Nancy Marshall-Genzer for Marketplace.
Every morning, David Brancaccio and the team on the Marketplace Morning Report get up way too early to help you get the news you need to start the day. So give them a listen. Gentrification. It's an important story, but one that usually follows the same narrative, right? A developer buys a building in a mostly minority working class neighborhood in a big city like New York, Austin, or Los Angeles. They have plans to tear it down and build new apartments and trendy coffee shops, leaving the current residents powerless. Well, that's not always the case. KCRW's Megan Jamerson brings us this story about a fight over gentrification in LA that didn't go exactly the way you'd expect.
Jose Parra is stocking up the bar at El Apetito, a restaurant in LA's historic Mexican-American neighborhood, Boyle Heights. His mom's owned this place for 17 years. Now the neighborhood is changing, including his customers.
I've seen it, with my own eyes. So they used to be full of mariachis, norteños. They're still here, but not like before.
Parra also lives in this building with his mom and grandma. One day last year, they got a letter from their landlord. The building owner had permits to demolish all 3 apartments and 5 businesses gone and replaced by a 50-unit apartment building and commercial tenants. Parra's mom, Rosa Garcia, feared the worst.
Mucha gente que vive a la redonda, todo Los Ángeles está lleno de pura gente que vive en la calle.
She says Los Angeles is full of people who live on the streets. We could be more of those people because the whole family depends on this place. The building is also home to Riarte Centro Literario, an indie bilingual bookstore. Viva Padilla is the owner.
Small businesses are what makes a community what it is. If it wasn't for the panaderia across the street, and it wasn't for the check cashing place across the street and the Mexican restaurant that's been there for 50 years. I mean, this is what keeps us fed, connected to the community.
Often there isn't much tenants can do to change a developer's plans, but the city of LA does have an appeals process. So Padilla argued that the demolition and replacement building would gentrify the neighborhood.
By no means are we trying to kind of take away any of the culture. This neighborhood is changing. We want to be part and parcel of that change.
Will Tiao and his wife bought the building 4 years ago. He's been buying and managing real estate in Boyle Heights for more than a decade and joining neighborhood organizations like the local Boys and Girls Club along the way.
I think that there are ways to make things change that are inclusive, and that's what we're trying to be.
5 of the 50 units will be very low-income apartments, and current residents would have first dibs. And to keep the commercial rent lower, the first floor would be an airy, open marketplace with a food hall and vendor stalls. Earlier this year, the city heard the appeal. Tenants argued that the displacement would have a negative mental health impact on the neighborhood. Ultimately, the city agreed. Padilla's gentrification argument actually worked, and for now, the building can't be demolished.
It's crazy still to think that it happened. I mean, I'm still processing.
It's not a done deal, though. California state law basically says gentrification and displacement isn't a valid reason to stop new projects, especially because of the state's housing shortage. And so Will Tiao's company sued the city of LA to keep the project alive. The case is still in court. California is invested in building more housing with developers like Tiao. After all, his plan is to demolish one building with 3 apartments and replace it with another that has 50 apartments.
And the idea is that, actually, the more supply you have, the lower the rents are for everybody else. Our hope is that it actually makes the area more affordable.
Still, all of this is leaving the actual current tenants like Rosa Garcia in limbo.
Que nos den un lease, pero que ya se acabe este nerviosismo que diario vivimos, ¿ah? Porque no es vida, no vives.
She says this daily stress needs to stop because it isn't life. You're not really living. The pressure grabs hold of you because you say, what's going to happen when tomorrow comes? If Garcia lost the apartment because of a demolition, local laws say her family would be entitled to at least $8,000 in relocation assistance. But she says it would be difficult to find another apartment with the below market rate she currently pays. These days, the average rent in the neighborhood costs $2,300 a month. In Los Angeles, I'm Megan Jamerson for Marketplace.
Coming up,
I was a little kid in a candy store. I was like, I get to order all of these books.
the sweet satisfaction of a good plot. But first, let's do the numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 339 points, 0.8%, to finish at 42,732. The Nasdaq added 340 points, 1.75%, to close at 19,621. And the S&P 500 gained 73 points, 1.25%, to end at 5942. For the week, the Dow slipped 0.6%, the Nasdaq gave up 0.5%, and the S&P also subtracted 0.5%. President Biden's decision to block the acquisition of U.S. Steel that Nancy Marshall-Genzer was telling us about, it sent the company shares down 6.5%. Would-be buyer Nippon Steel gained 1.2% in Tokyo. Checking in on three Detroit automakers, Ford Motor accelerated 2.4%, General Motors sped up 0.75%, and Stellantis hit the brakes to the tune of 3.5%. Bonds fell, the yield on the 10-year T-note rose to 4.59%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Revenued, providing working capital for businesses whose cash flow is holding them back. Revenued approves businesses based on revenue, not credit, with funds approved and available in a day. More at getrevenued.com. And by ADP Research, committed to making the world of work more productive through data-driven discovery. Insights at work for the future of work. Learn more at adpresearch.com.
WNYC is supported by the New York Historical and its exhibition Pets in the City, a visual history of New Yorkers and their animal companions over the last 2.5 centuries. More at nyhistory.org.
On this week's Wait, legendary Pittsburgh Steelers coach Bill Cowher explains why he regrets going to his 20th high school reunion in Pittsburgh.
My wife was getting madder and madder as the night's going on, and then the guys were getting drunker and drunker and telling me all the things I did wrong in the San Diego Chargers game.
I'm Peter Sagal. If you want people to lecture you on how you play our game, you should listen to this week's Wait from NPR. Tomorrow morning at 11 on 93.9 FM and AM 820 WNYC.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. In the 7 o'clock hour of All Things Considered, a new session of Congress began today, with Republicans taking full control in Washington this month. But the new session was not without internal drama for the party. We're going to hear all about it and much more at 7 o'clock. Stay tuned.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kristen Schwab. The car market has been a pretty bumpy one over the last handful of years. But here's a new sign of strength. More new cars were likely sold in the U.S. in 2024 than in any year since 2019. Thing is, if you squint at some underlying data, the picture is still a little precarious. Consumers have been taking on bigger financial burdens to buy new cars. Almost 1 in 5 people who bought new cars in the fourth quarter have a monthly payment of $1,000 or more, according to the car shopping site Edmunds. And the rate of borrowers delinquent on their loans was high in 2023 and ticked up in the first half of 2024. With that in mind, Marketplace's Henry Epp reports on whether stronger new vehicle sales are sustainable as we start the new year.
At Stivers Ford Lincoln in Waukee, Iowa, 2024 was the most normal year they've had since the pandemic. Owner Scott Polite says that's because they finally had strong inventory after chip shortages limited auto production for years. But he says,
what we're seeing is a more cautious buyer.
Because, he says, some of the incentives car companies used to offer, like 0% interest on a car loan for several years, are not that common anymore. So customers took their time to decide whether to buy.
It takes them longer to come to that realization that it's a new environment for buying vehicles out there.
Because car companies aren't overproducing these days, dealers aren't desperate to get them off the lots. The cars they are making are larger and have more technology. That's pushed up prices. And yet, says Jessica Caldwell, head of insights at Edmunds,
people are still buying vehicles, and they're still buying vehicles at these high prices.
Which means for those who can afford to take on a big loan for a new car,
what looks like is happening is people are just forced to allocate more money into their car budget.
Those high prices likely drove lower and middle-income buyers to the used car market, she says. The new car market did really pick up in the last few months of 2024 after the election and another Federal Reserve interest rate cut. Partly, says Jonathan Smoke, chief economist at Cox Automotive, because lenders started to lower auto loan rates, but not all that much.
They're still being fairly selective with regards to the terms that they're offering, the level of down payments that they're requiring on the loans.
So he thinks there's still plenty of room for interest rates to come down, which could boost new car sales, at least temporarily.
I feel a lot more confident about the next 3 to 6 months than I do for the full year.
Because, he says, potential policy changes from the next Trump administration, tariffs and changes to the electric vehicle tax credit could disrupt the car market once again. I'm Henry Epp for Marketplace.
Small businesses are becoming a bigger part of the economy. According to the Treasury Department, applications for new businesses averaged around 430,000 per month in 2024. That's 50% more than the monthly average in 2019. And one group's impact is expanding here: Latino entrepreneurs. A survey out earlier this year from the Stanford Graduate School of Business shows strong growth in the number of Latino-owned businesses. Here's one business owner who's part of that trend in the latest installment of our series, My Economy.
My name is Jane Rodriguez, and I am the owner of The New Romantics, Orlando's first romance-only bookstore. It was always a dream of mine to have a bookstore, and when I realized that I can have a genre-specific bookstore, it just made the dream more of a want. The name of The New Romantics was inspired actually by a Taylor Swift song called it's called New Romantics. And I think that I was literally just listening to it one day and I was like, wait a minute, this would be a really cool name for a romance-only bookstore. Prior to me opening The New Romantics, I was and have been an entrepreneur. Like, I knew how to establish an LLC and get your EIN number, but I didn't even know where to get books from. So the first time that we placed book order was for our first pop-up event back in April. And I was a little kid in a candy store. I was like, I get to order all of these books. And I remember actually when it was 3 full boxes of books. It was about 100 books total. And I genuinely cried when the books arrived at my store because it felt like the first step in like a dream coming true. As small businesses, it's really hard to secure business loans with any prior like bank statements and stuff like that. So I was applying for grants left and right. I was applying for loans and no one was really giving me any attention. So it got to a point where I decided to take loans out from family members. And I was grateful enough that they were willing to help contribute and make the dream come true. And they were there with me holding the ribbon at our ribbon cutting ceremony. I think that right now we are in a phase of our business where we're facing lots of massive revenue boosts because of the grand opening and because of the holidays. So I am going about things in a very cautious way. So I don't feel like we're going to have any issues paying rent and payroll, and eventually I'll be able to make a salary myself. But it's one of those things that I want to pretend doesn't exist until I know exactly what a regular month looks like. I have always just loved romance stories and the butterfly feelings it gives you. If we're reading like an enemies to lovers story where they start the book hating each other, you're just like, how are they going to fall in love? And being able to follow along on the character's journey to that is something that is so fascinating to me. And I will never, ever get tired of the feeling that I feel whenever I read romance books that scratch that itch that I've been looking for.
That was Jane Rodriguez, owner of the New Romantics in Orlando, Florida. This series only works with your help. Tell us how your economy is doing at marketplace.org/myeconomy.
Marketplace is supported by Odoo, management software designed to unite every aspect of business into one simple platform. Odoo aims to take businesses to the next level. ODOO.com. Everything any business will ever need.
This final note on the way out today, saw this in Axios. The number of prescriptions for GLP-1 drugs, the most commonly known brand is Ozempic, the number of prescriptions grew 10% between 2023 and 2024. The states with the highest growth rates were Rhode Island at 68%, Massachusetts 48%, and New Jersey 35%. Now, it's unclear how often these drugs are being prescribed for obesity versus diabetes versus heart disease. But let me tell you, it's not just the pharmaceutical and healthcare industries taking note. As we've reported before, executives at food and drink companies are really worried about the idea of Americans consuming less. Our theme music was composed by BJ Learman. Marketplace's executive producer is Nancy Fargali. Donna Tam is the executive editor. Neil Scarborough is the vice president and general manager. And I'm Kristen Schwab. Have a great weekend. We'll be back here on Monday. This is APM.